Hi, beautiful ladies. Welcome back to my channel. So today I want to talk to you about owning your identity and not allowing people to move the goalposts on your identity, on how you choose to identify yourself, on how you choose to show up in the world, etc. There's a lot of buzz in the internet streets concerning blackness and mixed raceness and who gets to identify as what, and just want to provide some context to help those who are listening, especially younger, darker skinned exoticals who may not have a support system or who may not come from a background where these type of conversations are discussed, with hopes that it will empower you, regardless of age, to own your identity and not allow other people to control and maintain it for you, especially within the Black community. It's one thing in the West where we complain a lot about racism and how white people and other non-Blacks like to define Black people as a monolith, especially Black women as a monolith, and how they place us in a box and then they treat us accordingly. But then it's one thing to have to deal with that. Yes, there are some cases where that happens, but it's even worse when you're having to deal with those issues at home, so to speak. You're having to deal with those issues within your community instead of staying on code and supporting each other. There's a lot of division, and unfortunately, that's not going to go anywhere. And the reason why this exists is because, and I'm speaking to and about Black women at this point, so I'm just going to say the reason why this exists is because Black women still haven't accepted and owned their own identity. And this is just in general. This doesn't apply to lighter skin or darker skin Black women individually. It applies to Black women as a whole. And so when some Black women see other Black women or Black adjacent women, whatever, owning their identity, identifying with what aligns closely with them, they seem to be bothered by that because they themselves have not negotiated and made peace with their own identity. And they're still grappling with their own internalized issues, whether it may be colorism or texturism. They're still grappling with that. And again, it's one thing to deal with that outside of the community. Yeah, okay, it happens here and there externally, but it mainly happens within the Black community, okay? And it happens from lighter skinned people and darker skinned people, where, some lighter skinned people may tell you, and if you're darker exotical, especially if you have some level of admixture, you can probably attest to lighter skinned family members making you feel bad for having darker skin or making comments like, oh, stay out of the sun. You don't want to get too dark. Okay, that's one thing. But then it's another thing when there's darker skinned people just like you making those same comments. And it's like, you and I are the same. We're supposed to be on the same team. Why are you perpetuating this hatred towards me like the other group is doing? Okay, we're supposed to be on code and we're supposed to lift each other up, because when we stay on code, we resist these narratives that our identity is less than the other identity. That's literally how you rebrand your image, by resisting staying on code and uplifting others who look like you. Every other group has done it except for the Black community. So for example, when South Asian communities, specifically the Indian community, was colonized by the British and they were told that their darker skin is less than and you need to be lighter skinned, they resisted by creating Bollywood. And yes, they still have their own issues that they are working through, but at the very least, they have created a foundation to say that we will no longer allow the British or anyone who is not Indian to tell us who we are and how we should show up, and to tell us that our beauty is less than. We are going to center ourselves, we're going to center our culture, our languages, our food, etc., and we're going to present it to the world. And whoever likes it, and whoever doesn't like it, doesn't like it. And yes, there are little micro sectors of Black women starting to show up and create spaces where they get to define themselves. But as you can see, there is still contention with who gets to define themselves as what. And honestly, on a personal level, having to deal with this, I have a smaller admixture. I come from Caribbean ancestry, but I also have Irish and German roots from my grandmothers. I identify as Black because that's what closely aligns with what I look like. And so I just look in the mirror and I'm like, I'm a Black woman. People respond to me as a Black woman. I have kinky curly hair. I have brown skin. And so I'm a Black woman. Like, what's the big deal? But when I embrace my Blackness, I'm often excluded. And so I have like long kinky curly hair similar to Kelsey and Kendra. Like it's in between Kelsey and Kendra of the Glam Twins. But then like at the back, it's like natural Niecy's hair texture. So when I embrace my Blackness, I'm often excluded because of my phenotype. And I'm told that I'm not down with the struggle or I just don't get it because of how I look. And then by extension, I remember specifically when I was in college and I would try to enter, I would like join like the Black Student Union. I would go to their events. I would often be excluded from their spaces and pretty much told that I wasn't welcome in those spaces. Or, for example, like if they had like a natural hair expo, I would always kind of feel uncomfortable because it was almost like, yeah, you can see that I have kinky curly hair. But then girls with like, I don't know, 4B, 4C hair would say, oh, well, you don't really understand because you have long hair and your hair texture is looser. And it's like, okay, but but I still have afro textured hair, which means that I get to still be in this space. Like, it took me leaving that space and getting a fresh perspective and being exposed to other spaces where I said, you know what? I'm not going to try to force myself in traditional quote unquote Black spaces anymore. I'm just going to stick to myself. But now that I'm on YouTube and there's other women like me who are also on YouTube, it's almost like unambiguous Black women get offended when we create our spaces or accept their label of us being the others and detach from them. And it's like wanting to have that level of control over someone else, where it's like, I'm going to continue to tell you that you're the other, that you're not like us, that you're not one of us. But then also, I'm going to get upset when you take ownership and take back your power and create your own space. You know, you just mind your own business. You're not talking about anybody else. I'm going to get upset at that because my identity is rooted in me wielding power over other people. And that comes from the victim mentality that I notice in the Black community, where they're always positioning themselves, Black people in general, always positioning themselves as the victim and moving the goalposts on that victimhood. So it's like I get to be a victim when I talk about how horrible brown and lighter skinned Black women are. But then I also get to be the victim when I talk about how horrible Black and lighter skinned women are when they create their own spaces and they center themselves. They talk about their hair texture being different than ours. They talk about their skin color, blah, 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 being different than ours because it's an attack on me. And so there I go again, being the victim. So it's like, we're not free to speak up about our experiences, just like how you're free to speak up on your experiences. We're not allowed to create our own spaces, just as you've done. So we kind of just, it's pretty much in order to appease your own internalized issues, we need to kind of just sit quietly while we continue to be denigrated and accept your bullying. You kind of see this same mentality again when you see Black leaders misappropriating funds. Okay, whether it's Black Lives Matter or elected officials misappropriating funds. And then when they're called out about it by non-Black people, oh, no, 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 that's racist. You're being anti-Black. You're being anti-Black by calling out these things. You're assuming that I'm stealing when the evidence is there that you have been misappropriating and stealing funds. I've also experienced, and I know that there's other women who've had similar experiences where whenever we embrace our ambiguity, it's like, okay, I finally reconciled that I am different, that I am not going to be fully accepted by the Black community, and that's totally fine. I'm going to show up as my true, authentic self. And so when we do that, for me, it's embracing my hair, my long natural hair, and no longer covering it up. So like, for example, I used to wear like a lot of braids when I was in high school, or I would wear like straight weaves or relax my hair so pin straight to the point that like my hair was so limp and there was nothing left, just so that I could show up and look like just a regular Black girl. And when I stopped doing that and wearing my long natural hair, I was told that, oh, you're just showing off and you need to stop trying to act like you're mixed because you'll never be accepted by the mixed community. And it's like, well, I'm not doing this for validation. I'm not doing this to be accepted by conventionally quote unquote mixed women. I'm doing this because I want to be true to myself. I want to be true to the way that I was created, and I have every right to bask in my natural glory and wear my hair the way that it was created growing out of my head. And if that bothers you, that's too bad. The same way how you say that you get to show up as an unambiguous Black woman in spaces, you get to disrupt conventionally white spaces, for example, and show up, is the same way that we get to show up wherever we want and be true to our roots and our identity. This is also based upon the stereotypes, the unspoken stereotypes that exist, that's created by the Black community and that's projected in the Black community of what it means to be mixed race. And to this day, Black people are still sticking to it. So the conventional having lighter skin with either type 2 or 3A hair at the very least. And that points out your internalized colorism and featureism issues, because there are plenty of mixed race people who do not fit that label. There are mixed race women who have darker skin with loose hair, like Ryan Destiny. People still don't accept the fact that Ryan Destiny is a mixed race woman, even though her ancestry is not a secret. Or on the flip side, having kinky hair with light skin like Nara Smith. If you see earlier photos of Nara Smith had like 3C, 4A hair, roughly. Are both of these women not mixed race because they're both not light skinned with type 2 hair? And this also proves that this is an internalized beauty standard because you project it onto others. If this was not a beauty standard that you believe that should apply to Black women, you wouldn't project it onto others. You would just resist it. You would just reject it and just not even engage with it altogether. But because you truly believe that this is a beauty standard that Black women are being held to, you project it onto others unknowingly. Because if you didn't, you wouldn't have a problem with darker skin Exoticals showing up as their true selves and accusing them of cosplaying as a mixed race woman, because you would understand that, as we've said like a million times over decades, that Black women are not a monolith and that we come in different shades and sizes and features. There are many monoracial, brown skin, dark skin Black women who have 100% African ancestry, for example, like Sharon Uja, who you would think like, oh, maybe she's mixed race. You're not familiar with the Nigerian community. You would think like, oh, maybe she's mixed race, because in my mind, a stereotypical Nigerian woman is darker skin with broader features. But for someone who is familiar with the culture and the country, you would understand that no, there are many people who are very, very fair skinned in Nigeria, like the Fulani people, who have lighter skin tones naturally. That's just the way that they were created and placed on this earth. By the way, I know that Sharon is not Fulani. I'm just making that reference for example's sake. So I know that this is a lot that I've kind of dumped out into a video. And for some people, it may be confusing, but because it is confusing. And honestly, it's senseless and stupid that we're having to still have these conversations and negotiate and grapple and prove our identities. But as a content creator, as an Exotical content creator, I have the unofficial responsibility, I guess, to provide context to those who align. And so if you are a brown skin, darker skin, whatever, or even lighter skinned Exotical who can relate to this message, please do not internalize the back and forth grappling of having to prove your identity, because this can lead to identity issues if you have an unresolved desire to fit in and be accepted. And it is human nature, okay? It's human nature to want to be accepted, to find acceptance, to find community, because it creates community and a sense of belonging. And a sense of belonging helps to form your identity. It helps to form your self-esteem and pretty much give you a purpose in life. But do not try to fit yourself in a pigeonhole scenario where the goalpost is constantly being moved, where you're told, you're Black in this situation, you're not Black in this situation, you're mixed race or Exotical in this situation, you're not mixed race and Exotical in this situation, okay? Life has its own nuances on its own. You do not need to complicate things. Just show up however you choose to show up and align with those who accept you regardless of skin tone or race. That's what it comes down to, especially if you live in a multicultural country where there's all shades and tones. On the grand scheme of things, nobody cares if you're an exotical. No one cares if you're mixed race. People may be fascinated by how you look because they find you attractive or they've never encountered someone who looks like you, and that's totally fine. But if you're constantly having to negotiate or almost beg and plead to fit in a category, that space is not for you. Okay? And you do yourself a disservice when you try to fit yourself in a space where you do not belong or where you're not being accepted. Okay? And especially if you are a younger exotical and you are in school, please be careful of this and try to find friends who accept you again for who you are, regardless of your race, because there are many exoticals who will tell you who have been bullied for their ambiguity. So things like haircutting, physical assault, mocking, things like that. You do not need to subject yourself to that. You have a bright future ahead of you, and when you are having to deal with these things, it's a distraction from your future. You should be focusing on where you're going to go study when it's time to go to college. You should be focusing on, if you're already in college, what study abroad course you want to do during the summer, or what you want to do after undergrad, if you want to go pursue your master's degree or a professional degree, or if you want to start working right away, internships. You should be focusing on what you're going to do this weekend, what new restaurant you're going to visit, or finding out what your color analysis is. Like, there are so many more interesting and fulfilling and just lighthearted and wholesome things that you can focus on that doesn't involve you having to negotiate your race and or your identity in order to be accepted, okay? There are lots of people who will accept you from all walks of life. You need to find where you fit in and do not limit yourself to one identity just to appease the masses. Okay, the Black collective, as I've spoken about before, will only be satisfied so long as they're holding the victim card and the victim mentality. And that shows up in so many other ways, whether it's promoting degeneracy or whether it's trying to erase and make ambiguous and exotical women disappear and go away. And it's just simply not going to happen. So freely embrace your identity, engage with content that resonates with you. If exotical content resonates with you, continue to connect with it. Continue to learn these things so that you can be confident and show up as your true self. A lot of ambiguous women and even unambiguous women are insecure and have confidence issues and low self-esteem because they haven't been able to connect with other ideologies and talking points that truly resonates with them. So if exotical, again, content resonates with you, connects with that, lean into that and allow that to help you build your identity. And if it doesn't, that's totally fine. Go to where you connect with. All right, that's all I have on this topic. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.